Hi, everybody. Welcome to the seventh and final lesson on modern existentialism. Finally, right? After so many videos. And the name of this last lesson is Existentialism and Christianity. And there is a reason why this is the last lesson. This lesson is actually, you might see it as an appendix, okay? Because I think I pretty much laid out the whole philosophy of modern existentialism in the previous six lessons. And and I said before that you don't need to be religious to live, embody, and benefit from this philosophy from modern existentialism. So there's that. But it is undeniable that Christianity has provided so much to existentialism. As a matter of fact, our founder, Soren Kierkegaard, he was a deeply religious Christian man who he never saw one thing apart from the other. Like for in Kierkegaard's thinking, the true existential life was a Christian life. Okay, and we're going to talk about that in this video. So, for Kierkegaard, these two things are inseparable. You cannot have one without the other. So, for those of you watching who are not religious, okay, let me exhort you to watch and become familiar with this connection, this relationship between existentialism and Christianity, and understand the contributions of Christianity to existentialism, because I think it's going to help you, having a much better, clearer picture of what existentialism is all about. And for those of you watching who are actual religious, well, um, stick around because I think you're gonna enjoy this lesson, and it might give you the possibility to explore aspects of your life that you haven't done so far. So, okay, we're gonna start with a quote from Soren Kierkegaard. And let me just say one more thing about Kierkegaard, because I know I might be giving the impression that I keep talking about Kierkegaard and just providing quotes and stuff. You might be thinking, gosh, this modern existentialism deal, it's nothing but, a recast of Kierkegaard's philosophy. And in a way, that is true. That is true. Why? Because I think Kierkegaard provided the foundation of this philosophy, and that's undeniable. Okay. But the difference with modern existentialism, the difference between Kierkegaard's philosophy and modern existentialism is that there has been very, very important developments in psychology that have actually proven Kierkegaard's correct in many, many important ways. And I think you've seen that in the previous lessons. And I'm going to make another connection today in just a few minutes between existentialism and psychology. So that's an important thing to incorporate, I would say, in a modern conception of existentialism, or modern existentialism as I call it. So, okay, and we're going to start with this quote by Kierkegaard coming from this book, The Diary of Soren Kierkegaard. That's funny. He didn't have a diary. In reality, Kierkegaard, he had a huge collection of journals just because he couldn't stop writing, right? And pretty much for most of his life, he would just write and write every single day about his day, about his thoughts. And this book, The Diary of Soren Kierkegaard, is just a tiny, very, very tiny sample of some of his journal entries. In this collection, though, I found this quote that I think it's perfect for this lesson, to begin this lesson. And this is Kierkegaard writing. Not until a man has become so utterly unhappy, or has grasped the sorrowfulness of life so deeply that he is moved to say and mean it, life for me has no value. Not till then is he able to make a bid for Christianity. And then his life may acquire the very highest value. All right, so for Kierkegaard, friends, how can I put this? Uh, Losing it all, being in a place of total hopelessness, hitting rock bottom, losing it all is a precondition to living an existential life. So for Kierkegaard, there's just no other way. You must lose everything. You must feel like life has no meaning. That there's so much suffering. You just cannot justify your thinking so much suffering and so much struggle. So, okay, if you're there, if that's where you are right now, well, according to Kierkegaard, you're in the perfect spot. Now you are ready to receive the truth of Christianity. And now the whole mystery of existence can be fully disclosed and revealed to you. Wow. You know, when I was putting together my notes for this last lesson, and I was going over my Kierkegaard books, right? And I picked this one and I found the quote and I was like, wow, this is perfect. So I'm gonna use this for this video. And then I started thinking, gosh, that is so interesting. I did the exact same thing in a way that Kierkegaard of what Kierkegaard is saying right here. Meaning what? The very first lesson on modern existentialism, remember? The problem of existence starts that way with depicting to you guys why life is so difficult, tragic, terrible, meaningless. And it seems like that is the appropriate way to start talking about existentialism. Now you might be wondering why. Now, now here is why psychology is so important. On that first lesson, friends, I hope you watched it. I really hope so. I mean, this is the very first lesson. In this first lesson, and I think in the very first video or second video, I talked about this man, this clinical psychologist, James Hollis, okay, who wrote a book called Living an Examined Life, like perfect title for a book, right? And this clinical psychologist, he says something really similar, okay, to what Kierkegaard is saying right here. He says that there's two halves of life, right? The first half is let's say, in the first half of life, we live like conventional lives, following conventional pursuits, going with the flow, basically. So our life, it's pretty much like not the best life because we have not full control of our actions and our thoughts, right? There's a lot of things that we ignore about ourselves. So the first half of life is not the best life, according to James Hollis. But then there's the second half of life. That's the life of introspection, the life where you start examining yourself, right? And this is when you begin living a meaningful, self-actualized life, or at least in that path of self-actualization. So the second half of life. But this is something really interesting that James Hollis says. And it's on lesson one again. That many times, perhaps most of the time, what triggers the second half of life, he says it's not a chronological moment. It's not like you reach a certain age, like you're in your 40s or 50s, and then the second half of life begins. He says, no. In some cases, people never get to live the second half of life. But he says what triggers the second half of life, in many cases, is a traumatic event, like a tragedy, a big accident. something so powerful that forces you to look inside and rethink everything about you. All your past actions, decisions, all your beliefs. So the second half of life begins in that place that Kierkegaard is describing right here, in a place where you say, life for me has no value, has no value. I have absolutely grasped the sorrowfulness and meaninglessness of life. Life makes no sense to me. I've lost it all. I've hit rock bottom. Okay, now you're in the right place. Now your second half of life, the best part of your life, can begin because you're going to do that. You're going to begin for the first time. You're going to begin examining yourself. You're going to begin knowing, really, truly knowing who you are. So that's quite something, right? You see what I'm saying? That's the common ground between what Kierkegaard said and psychology, what psychologists know today. So, okay, that's a good start. So there's more to say about Kierkegaard, and I have one more slide. But think about this for a moment, right? Because if you're watching and your life has been okay for the most part, okay, maybe this can be like interesting information for you, but it's not going to make a difference in your life. So ideally, how ironic is to say this though? Ideally, if you're suffering, if you're struggling with your life, if you've gone through something really, really traumatic and painful, okay, then you're going to get this. You're going to get it. And for Kierkegaard, again, you see, as I said before, only when you're in that place, you can make a bid for Christianity. You can give Christianity a shot. Once again, for Kierkegaard, the true existential life is the Christian life. And we're going to explore that on the next slide. The three modes of existence. Okay, friends, this is Kierkegaard 101. Okay, this is a very fundamental idea in Kierkegaard's thought. And it's very important to fully understand, right, his Christian take on existentialism. So what is this three modes of existence? Well, according to Kierkegaard, there are three ways of being, of living or existing, let's say. And the first way, which is the default way, is the aesthetic. And what is the aesthetic mode of existence? Is that kind of existence in which people live in pursuit of happiness, joy, pleasure. It's like a hedonistic life, okay? So it's a life whose goal is to maximize pleasure, joy, minimize pain, and that's pretty much it. That's all there is to life, according to aesthetic people. That does not mean that people who live in this mode of existence are like nihilistic people who are irresponsible and they only live for the present. Okay, that's not necessarily what this means. People who live in the aesthetic mode of existence, uh, they might make plans for the future. They might save money and go to school to start a career. But in the end, the fundamental goal is the same, is to enjoy life, to be able to afford good things, live in a beautiful house, drive a nice car, and be able to have great experiences traveling, right? So people, for example, people who save money for retirement, right? Which is something that most people find appropriate and wise to do. These people, what do they want in the end? They want to live after they stop working, right? After they retire, They want to live comfortably, peacefully. They want to be able to, afford certain, you know, luxuries or pleasures, just traveling and doing that sort of thing. So in the end, that's it. That's the goal. Enjoy life. Maximize pleasure, happiness, you might want to say, in life. That's what life is all about. The pursuit of happiness, the pursuit of pleasure. Okay. And I said it's the default way because I mean, when we are born, when we're children, when we're young, that's what life is all about for us, right? We want to have fun, we want to enjoy our time, our life, and we complain, we whine when things are not going our way, right? And we're not experiencing joy or pleasure. So, okay. Then there is another way of being, of existing, and that is the ethical way. Okay. Now, in the ethical way, let's say the ethical way relies essentially on the idea of empathy. Okay, empathy is what's going to give you, it's what's going to open your eyes to the ethical life. And what do I mean by that? I mean, when you learn to put yourself in other people's shoes, okay, when you begin reflecting, internalizing your actions to other people, you begin to understand what ethics or morality is all about. Okay, so for example, if you reflect on lying, okay, and you think, okay, I don't like when people lie to me and they deceive me. Well, if I lie to people, they're not going to like it. Like, I know what that feels. Therefore, lying is wrong. Okay, we immediately have this moral realization. Okay, it's not right to deceive people. And that becomes something very important in our thinking, in the way we live. You think, for example, um, saying nice things to people, right? You appreciate when people tell you nice things and compliment you and so on, and you think, wow, so I enjoy that. Therefore, when I compliment other people and I say nice things to other people, they like that too. Therefore, saying nice things to people is morally appropriate, right? And the opposite is also true, right? You think, gosh, I hate when people say nasty things to me. Well, if I say the same nasty things to other people, they're not going to like it. I get it. Therefore, saying nasty things to people is wrong. And gosh, you can think of so many other things like generosity. You appreciate when people are generous to you and they help you. You think, well, it must feel great, when you help other people. They must really appreciate it and value your action, and and so you adopt that way of thinking, the ethical way of thinking, and as a consequence, you become a good person in the eyes of society. Let's say you are seen as a good moral person because you have that outlook on life, the ethical outlook. So, so there you go. Uh, the aesthetic life and then the ethical life. Now, there are different levels of commitment to an ethical life, I have to say, because obviously not everybody is equally moral or ethical, right, in their orientation. So there are different levels of commitment, let's say. Think of it as a spectrum, okay? A spectrum in which we have on one end somebody super, super, super ethical, let's say Mother Teresa. Okay, she stands on that end of the spectrum. Somebody who dedicated her whole life, like every single minute of her life, was dedicated to help other people. Okay, Mother Teresa. And then on the other side of the spectrum, you have an aesthetic person, somebody like Andrew Tate. Okay, I have nothing against Andrew Tate, but I think he exemplifies the aesthetic way of living. After all, this, I mean, you might be a fan, maybe you might like his content and what he does and what he says, but in the end, this is somebody who is for whom the whole point of life it's about maximizing joy, right? So he gives advice to young people, especially how to become competent and successful professionally, financially, so they can afford good things, having a good wife, maybe two or three. So okay, we have in this spectrum of ethical life, let's say, we have Mother Teresa on one end, and we have Andrew Tate on the other. And I would say it's true that most people find themselves like in the middle, right? So some people are more committed to an ethical life than other people, and that's okay. Um, some people might be very, very committed to I don't know, help other people in some capacity, like mentoring, for example. Some people are really into that, mentoring young people, and it's something very they do regularly, very seriously. And other people are not that committed to help others, but they still validate the idea that it's important to be nice, to be ethical, be moral, and to say nice things to people and to promote generosity and that sort of thing, right? So, but still, these people live in the ethical mode of existence. There's still elements of the aesthetic life. Like people living in the ethical mode of existence, they still appreciate, right, enjoying life, let's say. But if you think about it, when you have this way of looking at things, especially when it comes to your relationships, you're dealing with other people, you're aware of the ethical sphere, right, or domain of actions, then obviously you're not going to live like an aesthetic person, somebody who's simply dedicated to the pursuit of pleasure. All right. Your peers are going to validate your actions and your lifestyle when you live in the ethical mode, not so much when you live in the aesthetic mode. Now, there is one more mode of existence, and that is the religious mode of existence. Now, friends, this is not like our typical conception of religious people. This has nothing to do with that idea. Like if you're thinking, oh, so the right way to live, the religious way is it's a life of just going to church every Sunday and maybe going also in the middle of the week and for a Bible study and praying and reading your Bible. What else? Tithing, giving 10% of your income to the church. And what else? Voting conservative, Republican. Okay, if you're thinking this is what the religious mode of existence implies, you're absolutely, absolutely wrong. As a matter of fact, Kierkegaard wrote extensively against this idea of Christian life. Okay, he actually he called this way of thinking about Christianity. He called it Christendom, like the Christian culture. I hope you watch that fourth lesson on the crowd because this is what this is. Okay, the crowd, as you might recall, is the set of expectations of a particular community, a set of beliefs and expectations that they expect everyone who is a member of that community to conform to, right? So when people who are Christians, I keep using my fingers, people who consider themselves Christians, they have this set of expectations. Okay, once again, you must go to church every Sunday, you must tithe, you must be conservative in your views, and so on. One example we talked about on lesson 4 was the bumper sticker. You can't be Catholic and support abortion. That is an expectation of the Catholic crowd. Okay, if you consider yourself Catholic and you support abortion, you're not a Catholic. You think you're Catholic, but you're not. Okay. That is the crowd. And friends, that has nothing to do with what Kierkegaard meant by the religious mode of existence. And I'm going to tell you what it is. Kierkegaard wrote a very important book, short book, I have to say, Fear and Trembling, in which he sort of lays out what he considers the religious mode of existence. And in this little book, he uses the example of Abraham. Okay, um, and it's so interesting because Christians disagree among themselves so much about the Bible, about what how to interpret Scripture, and there's even more disagreement between Christians and Jews. But for both Christians and Jews, Abraham is the father of the faith. Okay, Abraham represents the uh, the best example of a life dedicated to God, to a life of faith and devotion. Right? There's no better example in the Bible than Abraham. And actually, the Bible itself calls Abraham the father of the faith. So, okay, the most important example of faith that you can find, okay, Abraham. And Kierkegaard, in Fear and Trembling, talks about a very particular aspect in Abraham's life, something, an experience, right? And here it is. You might be familiar with this story. God shows up to Abraham one day and says, Abraham, I want you to take your son, the one you love, Isaac, and I want you to sacrifice him for me. I want you to go to the top of this mountain and offer your son in sacrifice to me. Now, Abraham was really, really attached to this son, to Isaac. So pretty much God was asking Abraham to give for him, for God, his most precious, valuable thing, right, in life. And guess what? Abraham complies. He says, okay, Lord. And so the day set, he takes his son and he tells people in his family, in his community, my son and I, we're going to go to that mountain and we're going to worship God. That's what he says. Does not give more details. So he takes his son, and at some point on the way there, I think Isaac asks his father, hey, Dad, so what are we going to do? And Abraham is like, well, we're going to offer sacrifices to God. And Isaac goes, and where is the animal we're going to sacrifice? And Abraham says, God will provide the sacrifice. So, okay. Poor, poor child. He had no idea that he was going to be the sacrifice. So, okay. So they go up the mountain, and Abraham begins tying his son against this trunk or something. And the son is like going like, Dad, what's going on? Why are you tying me to this trunk? And Abraham takes a knife and he raises his hand and he is about to kill his son. And at that moment, God tells this angel, sends this angel to Abraham and says, okay, stop, Abraham. And so an angel shows up right at that moment when Abraham is about to sacrifice his son. And the angel says, Abraham, stop, stop. The Lord has seen that you're a righteous man, that you truly and absolutely trust him and love him, and that you're willing to give him your most precious. So you don't have to sacrifice your son. And Abraham looks around and he sees this baby goat, something like that, trapped in some bushes. And he takes that goat and offers the goat in sacrifice, kills the goat in sacrifice to God. And that's the story, right? And this is the father of the faith. Well, Kierkegaard uses this example to say, listen, This is the father of the faith, and what he's doing here in this story has nothing to do with the ethical life. Why? Because the religious life is something very, very different from the ethical life, the ethical mode of existence. And obviously, in the eyes of the community and everybody, right? What Abraham was about to do was to commit a crime. That was a crime. Like really killing your own son in sacrifice to God? Are you crazy? And obviously, Abraham is not empathizing or putting himself in his son's shoes, right? Because that's not his outlook, right? That's not his orientation. His orientation is religious. And that means living for God, committed to this relationship he has with God. Okay. Now, you might think, okay, so this is crazy. Who wants a religious life? I mean, if God is going to ask you to kill family members, I mean, this is crazy. Okay, you have to be a bit more, let's say, generous in your interpretation, number one, and number two, a bit more high resolution and deeper, I have to say, in your analysis, because this is really what's going on. When you have a relationship with God, you you have a relationship with yourself, a very deep relationship with yourself. What do I mean by that? I mean that when you talk to God, when you pray, it's like you're having an inner conversation, right? You can see this in the Psalms, and we're going to talk more about this in an upcoming video. When you pray, you're asking yourself some questions, and you present to God some issues that you're dealing with. And but what's going on really is that you're having this dialogue with yourself, and you're digging inside, trying to find an answer, a solution. And in this exercise and in this process, you get to know yourself a lot, like very, very deeply, because it's a process of self-examination. That's what it is. That's what a relationship with God is. It's um, it's knowing yourself, examining yourself, and remember that's what existentialism is about, right? I said in a previous video, it's about two things: examining yourself, knowing yourself, and being authentic. Okay, so and that means what? That means that you're going to find things within you that people in your community, your peers, they're going to find outrageous. And yet, that is the right thing to do. We are, according to Kierkegaard, and the religious life, the religious mode of existence is one in which you live you pursue a unique way. You realize that you have a unique path, a unique mission, and that many times this unique path and unique mission is going to bring a lot of criticism from your peers. Okay, they're going to criticize you, think you're crazy, and yet you have to understand that if this is the right way for you as an individual, then you must be okay and you must be willing to take the heat. So, so that is the example of Abraham's sacrificial or potential sacrificial of his son. Uh, Something that in the eyes of the community was crazy, but it was the right thing to do for him because he was pleasing. He was he was determined to please God or his conscience. I hope this makes sense. In the next video, actually, we're going to talk about this connection between God and conscience because many philosophers think it's one and the same thing. God is your conscience, it's yourself. So, okay, the religious mode of existence, therefore, is not it has nothing to do with conformity, with the crowd. It has nothing to do with the ethical life. Okay, so it's a different life. It's true. It's true that there are ethical aspects in, let's say, in the Christian faith. There are very important ethical injunctions. The golden rule, for example. Okay, this is an injunction to to do exactly that, to put yourself on other people's shoes, right? To practice empathy, internalize empathy. Okay, golden rule, right? Don't do to other people what you don't want them to do to you. So what does that mean? Okay, there's some things that I don't like people when people do or say to me, like when they lie to me, I don't like that. Well, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to lie, right? Because I don't want people to do that to me. Okay, we talked about that, right? Empathy and putting ourselves in other people's shoes. If you think about it, right, the golden rule is an injunction to do that. So, okay, so that's ethical. That's in the ethical domain. And it's true that many people, right, when they think of religion, they think it's an ethical thing, right? It's an ethical ideology. Um, we most of us have the idea that when you go to church, the goal is you want to be a better person, a good person, right? That's kind of like the assumption. But you see, according to Kierkegaard and according to the example of Abraham, it's not about being a good person in the eyes of others, being religious. Being religious is simply examining yourself, knowing yourself, discovering your own path, and live according to that path, pursue that path. It's a unique path, and it's so unique that people are going to, once again, people might find it wrong, but if you know it's the right path for you, then that's it. That's what you should pursue. So this has nothing to do with advocating, killing family members or doing crazy stuff like that. No, no, that's not what it means. I guess the test to Abraham was one in which the test was, okay, will you be willing? Imagine God for a moment, right? Is your conscience asking you, will you be willing to pursue what is right for you, even if everybody will think you're crazy? Will you be willing? Will you have the courage to face the criticism, the objection, and the risks of pursuing your own path? So that's, I would say, it's probably the lesson of this story. So the religious life, therefore, has nothing to do with with these expectations about being religious. You're not expected, according to the religious mode of existence, to do anything but knowing yourself and pursue your own path, right? Now, in lesson 5, I talked about finding our mission in life. I hope you remember, or I hope you watched the lesson. How do we find our mission in life, our vocation? Okay, and I think you can live a meaningful life, pursue a very unique mission, and live happily, right? And feel like you're living a self-actualized life. You know yourself, you're doing what you love, and your life is full of joy and meaning. Meaning, I should say, rather than joy. You really find your life meaningful. And even if things are not going great, it's still meaningful what you're doing, what you're pursuing. Okay, but here's the difference. This is probably the criticism Kierkegaard would raise against uh, those people who are not religious, right? People like you, maybe you watching, who you are not religious, you don't believe in God and any of that stuff, and yet you like modern existentialism, you want to live a meaningful life, and you find this idea of crafting your own story and finding your own mission, you find it meaningful and so on. Kierkegaard will make this criticism to you. Okay, your life might be great, meaningful, but you're still in the ethical mode of existence, meaning what you're pursuing, your mission, is still something that it's validated by your peers, by the society. You're doing something appropriate in the eyes of the rest of the society. So, for example, my vocation is being an educator, right? And that's an ethical vocation. So every time I talk to people or I meet people and I tell them that I'm an educator, they go like, "Oh, wow, that's really good. Oh, we need more educators. That's awesome." So there's validation from others regarding what I do. And for Kierkegaard, this is risky. This is not great because we should pursue a life that you know it's the right life, even if everybody else thinks it is absolutely wrong. That's what it means to be an individual. And this is probably Kierkegaard's favorite word, being an individual. Because after all, that's the risk. If you're living a life that everybody else finds appropriate, correct, wise, then probably you're not living what the life you're supposed to be living. uh, Kierkegaard, and especially and religious people would agree to this. But Kierkegaard believed that we are designed by God. We were created to live one way, one unique way. Okay, that's why we have a unique DNA, right? We have a unique DNA, a unique genetical makeup recipe, let's say. Okay, that should tell you your life should be unique. The kind of um, mission, right, you adopt should be unique. Of course, yes, there's twin people, twin brothers who share the same DNA, and yet, twin brothers, sisters, they tend to be very, very different, right? They have different personalities, they have different interests. So there you go. Everybody is designed, created to live a very unique life. But that means, unique means that other people are going to find it weird, unwise, crazy, because you're just pursuing your own unique interest and your unique mission. The characters in the Bible, all the New Testament, they were all of them, very, very different. They did different things, they had different missions, they had different backgrounds, different struggles, and that's what we're supposed to do. That's the way we're supposed to live. That's the religious life, the life of the individual. So, whenever people say, "Oh, you're the right way of living is the Christian way," and that means this set of expectations. You should do this. You should go to church. You should read your Bible. You should tithe. You should. No. Uh-uh. Kierkegaard, like I said, wrote extensively against this idea, against the Christian crowd and these expectations. That it has nothing to do with the Christian life, with the religious life, according to Kierkegaard. And I happen to agree. I agree 100%. So, what about you? Do you agree? Tell me what you think. Post a comment, and especially, I am interested in reading your comments if you are not religious, and I want to know what you think about these three modes of existence. Are you okay with finding yourself in the ethical mode of existence? Do you feel you're missing out by not being a religious person, or let me just clarify that. Not being a religious person, living in the religious mode of existence according to Kierkegaard. Do you think you're missing out on some stuff? Do you think there's something I'm getting wrong, or maybe Kierkegaard is? Let me know. Please post a comment, and I'll be more than happy to read it and respond to it. For now, I'm going to say bye. And there are 3 more videos to watch about this lesson on lesson 7. And I hope you continue watching. Okay, so thank you. See you next time.